To the world, Adrian Vale and his wife Alina were the definition of success. He was the youngest CEO in the city's history, bold and visionary, turning small startups into billion-dollar giants. She was graceful, intelligent, and admired for her quiet charity work. Their penthouse overlooked the skyline like a throne above the city. Magazines called them the golden couple. But perfection is easiest to fake from a distance. Behind the polished interviews and red carpet smiles, their marriage felt increasingly hollow. Adrian's ambition had grown sharper with each business victory. He measured life in profit margins and strategic advantages. Alina measured it in moments, laughter over breakfast, soft conversations before sleep, hands held in silence. Lately, those moments had disappeared. The night Alina found out she was pregnant, she cried not from fear, but from joy. She imagined tiny footsteps across marble floors, bedtime stories in rooms filled with warmth, Adrian softening at the sight of their child. She believed this baby would bring them closer. She planned everything carefully, a candlelit dinner, his favorite wine, ultrasound photos tucked inside a small silver box. When she told him, she waited for his face to light up. It didn't. Adrian stared at the ultrasound image like it was a contract he hadn't agreed to sign. A baby, he repeated, his tone flat. Right now. Alina's smile faltered. Yes, I thought you'd be happy. He stood and walked toward the window overlooking the city. We're negotiating a merger worth $500 million. This isn't the right time. There's never a perfect time, she whispered. There is when you plan properly. He replied coldly. That was the first crack she couldn't ignore. Over the following weeks, his patience grew thinner. He worked later. He avoided conversations about the nursery she quietly began designing. When she asked him to attend a doctor's appointment, he sent his assistant instead. Then the arguments began, not loud, but sharp. He pressured her to sign revised financial documents for asset protection. She refused without reading them carefully. You don't trust me? He asked, eyes darkening. I do, she said softly, but I need to understand. Something shifted in him that night. The storm outside matched the tension inside the penthouse days later. Rain slammed against the windows as another argument spiraled out of control. Words were thrown like glass, accusations, frustration, resentment. Moments later, a crash echoed through the marble halls. By morning, the press statement was prepared. A tragic fall, pregnancy complications. An unfortunate accident. Alina lay unconscious in a private hospital suite, and Adrian stood before cameras, wearing grief like a perfectly tailored suit. Alina's adoptive parents, Victor and Marian Laurent, were not people who panicked easily. To the public, they were elegant philanthropists, their names linked to hospitals, schools, and city foundations. But beneath the polished veneer lay a pair of minds honed for strategy, precision, and influence. They had built empires quietly, their presence commanding without raising voices, and when they heard the news of Alina's accident, their calm exterior hid a storm brewing underneath. Victor was the first to speak, his voice low and measured. Something doesn't add up. Marian, seated opposite him, tapped a pen against her notebook. Hospital reports are inconsistent. The timeline, it's too convenient. They didn't rush to blame Adrian. That was not their style. They believed in facts, not assumptions. But instincts, honed over decades, told them something was deeply wrong. They flew to the city immediately, bypassing any attention. Their arrival at the hospital was quiet but commanding. Doctors and nurses instinctively gave them space, sensing their presence was different from ordinary family concern. Alina was unconscious, fragile, her body small beneath the white sheets. Victor studied the medical reports meticulously. Blood tests didn't match the severity reported in the press release. Marion examined hospital protocols, security cameras, and staff schedules. Every detail seemed almost altered. "I want everything investigated quietly," Marion said. "No alerts, no leaks. We'll handle this ourselves." They hired private investigators who worked in shadows, retracing Alina's steps from the day she collapsed. Security footage, previously reported missing, was recovered from cloud backups. Hospital staff were interviewed discreetly, often under the guise of unrelated audits. Even Adrian's financial maneuvers were quietly traced: offshore accounts, unusual asset transfers, life insurance policies. Victor frowned at the spreadsheets piling up. He's not just reckless, he's calculating. He prepared for this. Marion leaned back, lips pressed in a tight line. "Then we'll make him regret underestimating us." Unlike Adrian, the Lawrence were patient. They did not act in haste. They were surgical, moving pieces into place like a chess game. They quietly began acquiring company shares through intermediaries, destabilizing Adrian's hold on his empire. They reached out to journalists who owed them favors, letting hints of financial mismanagement slip in carefully worded conversations. Adrian remained oblivious, caught in his arrogance, thinking the minor disturbances were mere market fluctuations. But by the time he realized the magnitude of the storm approaching, Victor and Marion had already laid the foundation for a plan that would dismantle him completely, financially, socially, and emotionally. He had built his empire believing it made him untouchable. He had forgotten one crucial fact: Alina's family was not ordinary, and ordinary people never toppled kings. Adrian Vale had always believed in control. Numbers, contracts, investors, everything obeyed him. The city moved to his rhythm, or so he thought. But now, cracks began appearing, subtle at first, like hairline fractures in marble. It started with a single article in a respected financial journal: "CEO under federal investigation for financial irregularities." Adrian stared at the screen, disbelief mingling with anger. The article was precise, citing documents he hadn't realized were recoverable: off the books transfers, questionable tax filings, mysterious asset movements, each detail meticulously outlined. He called his lawyers, demanding the situation be contained immediately, but the containment was already too late. The Laurent family had orchestrated every move with silent precision. Within days, the board convened an emergency meeting. Long-time allies, once loyal, now questioned his decisions publicly. Investors, who had clung to his charisma, began withdrawing funds. Stock prices began tumbling, and the media smelled blood. Headlines screamed of corruption and mismanagement, eroding the empire Adrian had built from the ground up. He watched from his glass office as helicopters circled the building. A crowd gathered below, snapping photos, discussing the fall of the city's golden boy. Adrian's phone rang incessantly, calls from advisors, journalists, and even distant acquaintances seeking statements. Each call chipped away at his composure, but the real shock came when he returned to the hospital. He had avoided it for weeks, citing meetings and strategy sessions. Now, he finally stepped into Alina's room, expecting weakness, fear, or gratitude. Instead, he found Marion Laurent seated calmly beside Alina's bed. Her posture was unyielding, her expression unreadable. "She remembers," Marion said softly, her eyes piercing. Adrian froze. Alina's eyelids fluttered open. Her gaze, once warm and trusting, now burned with clarity and purpose. The fear that had once defined their marriage was gone. She looked at him, unafraid, and Adrian felt something he hadn't felt in years: powerless. Minutes later, security escorted him out. Alina refused to see him again, even as he pleaded, trying to assert the authority that had always defined him. At the same time, the Laurent family moved forward legally. Every document, every recovered file, every financial irregularity was turned over to authorities. Adrian's empire began to crumble not with a dramatic explosion, but like an unstoppable avalanche. The city watched in disbelief. The man who had been untouchable, revered, feared toppled. Every board member, every investor, every ally who had once bowed to his power turned away, leaving him isolated in a world he had once dominated. From the penthouse to the boardroom, whispers followed him. The Golden CEO had become a cautionary tale, proof that arrogance and cruelty, no matter how cleverly concealed, eventually meet consequences. And outside, the city realized something chilling. The people you underestimate, the quiet ones, can orchestrate a storm that leaves kings powerless and the world watching in awe. The trial was a spectacle the city could not ignore. For 6 months, every day felt like a public reckoning. Courts were packed, journalists filled the hallways, and every detail of Adrian Vale's empire, from offshore accounts to boardroom manipulations, was exposed in painstaking clarity. Elena, once fragile and silenced, became the centerpiece of the courtroom. She no longer trembled or faltered. The woman who had been trapped by Adrian's ambition and cruelty now spoke with measured strength. Her testimony revealed not just the financial deceit, but the emotional manipulation, the quiet coercion, the months of fear she had endured. Every word landed like a hammer blow, and every lie Adrian had told unraveled. Outside, the city watched live broadcasts with rapt attention. People whispered in cafes and boardrooms alike. The Golden CEO was falling, and the evidence was irrefutable. Stock markets reacted sharply as shareholders pulled out. Executives resigned, and alliances dissolved. Adrian's name, once whispered with awe, was now repeated with incredulity and scorn. Victor and Marion Laurent did not appear in court as vindictive spectators. Their revenge was not in theatrics, but in precision. Every document, every recovered file, every subtle manipulation they had orchestrated came together to dismantle him completely. They were like surgeons, exact and controlled, ensuring that Adrian's empire collapsed without a single misstep. When the verdict was finally read, Adrian's face betrayed no shock, only the faint, hollow echo of disbelief. Guilty on all counts, financial fraud, corporate manipulation, and attempted coercion. The fall, re-examined through forensic evidence and Alina's testimony, was legally reclassified as aggravated assault. His empire, once untouchable, was stripped from him. Meanwhile, Alina's life began to rebuild, slow but steady. Months of therapy, physical recovery, and emotional healing were illuminated by a quiet resilience she had never fully known. Her pregnancy had progressed, and when her daughter was born, healthy and alert, the Laurents were there, pillars of strength and unwavering protection. Victor held his granddaughter delicately, whispering promises she would never know fear, while Marion pressed a gentle kiss to Alina's forehead, a silent vow that no harm would ever touch their family again. Adrian, once a titan, now existed only in whispers of scandal. The city learned a harsh truth: power without empathy is fragile, and cruelty always leaves traces. The Laurents' revenge was not loud, not flashy, but perfect. It was calculated, patient, and inescapable. Adrian had believed he could manipulate everything, control everyone, but he had forgotten one thing: love, loyalty, and precision can be stronger than wealth, and the quietest storms often leave the deepest marks. From that day forward, the city remembered the tale, a story of betrayal, survival, and a revenge so measured it shook a titan to his core.